Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, I think the audio pin might change depending on the individual, but we've got most everyone who has registered on, and we'll just go ahead and get started. I know you all are all very busy folks, so thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to be part of this webinar. I'm really looking forward to talking through some of these different components of volunteer management and recruitment with you all. Please continually enter information in the chat box if you have any questions. And I will try to work through all of those as we go along. We don't have to wait until a particular Q&A or anything like that. Just want to hear from you all as we move through the material.
Okay.
And just once again, if you will mute your phones, unless you were asking a question, or you can go ahead and ask questions on the chat box. That would be great. I think we have one person who is on this chat, and it looks like it might be spam. So let's see if I can remove this individual real quickly. Pardon me.
Now, I have a question because I'm on the computer and I'm also on the phone because I hear better on the phone than on the computer. But with the computer, are there going to be like slides and all kinds of stuff?
Can you see the slides? Have you gone to the website?
Okay.
So in your registration, the email that I sent to you all, you'll see a website, please join the meeting, so you're going to click on that.
Okay.
And then that'll get you to the screen that we're all of.
Okay, great.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, folks, so welcome again. This is kind of our general plan for the morning. We may not go until noon. That's just going to be depending on your questions and so on. So we'll try to have you out earlier than that. But general agenda is here on your screen. I looked at the information that you all shared when you were registering for this particular webinar, and so I did try to include some of the information that you all were looking for. And then if there are things that you would like to hear more about, the survey that I sent to you all will include opportunities for you to share what you'd like, because we want to do this webinar at least twice a year, and we do hope to have a convening for state agencies, which we did do last year. A few of you were part of that, and so doing some in-person work with our state agencies and then programs within those agencies about volunteer management. So I want to be as responsive as possible to what your actual needs are when it comes to volunteer management, starting programs or beginning programs and so on. So certainly I would love to talk with you all more about that. And if you ever have any ideas or thoughts or problems that you'd love to brainstorm or troubleshoot, certainly let me know about that too. I'm always available for conference calls and quick chats about things like that.
Okay.
Edith, I see that you're having some issues. Did you go to the website? I'm hoping that you did, and you clicked on the on that link in the email for that purpose. Okay. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about Volunteer Florida real quickly. We are the state's lead agency for national service and volunteerism. Some of you are probably familiar with AmeriCorps, it's sort of like the domestic Peace Corps, and we administer a large portion of those funds for the state through the federal government, which is that agency is a corporation for national and community service. We are also the lead agency when it comes to the state's emergency response team for donations and volunteers before, during, and after disaster. So that's a pretty big component of what we do there, and we have an emergency management team for that specifically. We also have the Volunteer Generation Fund, which may be of interest to some of you. That is an easier lift than AmeriCorps, and that funding is specifically to help organizations recruit, manage, and train and retain volunteers, skills-based volunteers specifically. It's about I think it's a $13,000 grant, and there is a match requirement there, I believe, of 100%. But there's a tremendous amount of training that it provides, and it's specifically for skills-based volunteers, the recruitment of skills-based volunteers, but you all get to decide what skills-based means. So it doesn't necessarily mean pro bono or something like that. And the notice of funding opportunity for that will be coming out soon. And I'll tell you in just a little bit about another great grant opportunity that we have that's actually available now. Real quickly about the department that I am the head of. I'm the Volunteer Services Director, and so I'm a department of one at the moment, but my focus is to be a liaison among stakeholders within the volunteerism landscape, which is very broad and big in a state like Florida. But that looks like a lot of training and support and resources for our nonprofits, our state agencies, even the private sector at times, whether it's just advising about best practices, helping people to develop or create or reinvigorate volunteer programs. I do a good bit of speaking around the state and a number of different special projects for Volunteer Florida. We are all familiar with all other duties as assigned, I'm sure, so I have quite a few of those as well. What you see on your screen are just a number of the initiatives that we handle here at Volunteer Florida, and there's quite a bit. So we really enjoy the work that we do. We have a fantastic team, and certainly with some of those grant opportunities I mentioned, we have a fantastic Director of National Service who can share more information with you all, as well as our Volunteer Generation Fund Program Manager, Audrey, who's fantastic as well. So grant opportunities, I know that's not exactly what this is about, but we certainly have those opportunities that help to leverage the human capital in your communities to better serve the missions of your organization. Okay, just real quickly, I have a couple people who cannot see the screen. I'm so sorry, everyone. I'm just trying to double check. Let's see. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, let me know if any of you who said you can't see it now. Hooray! Yeah. I don't know if there is anything that, so you can see, okay, great. I don't know if there's ever a situation in which there aren't technical difficulties. Has anybody had one? Because I certainly haven't. Okay, I'm getting that chat box pulled back out now. Okay, onward. So some of you may be familiar with this, but we do have a really fantastic award. It's called the Champion of Service Award. And the nominations, it's a rolling deadline, so we accept nominations at any time on our website. This is a fantastic opportunity to showcase a really exceptional volunteer that you might have. It is essentially the Governor's Service Award. And so every month at cabinet meetings, and they happen mainly during the kind of the school year sort of timeline, We select somebody for that Champion of Service Award. If they are able to get to Tallahassee or already in Tallahassee, they are recognized at a cabinet meeting, so they get to meet all the cabinet members as well as the governor. You can see these photos above. So we're always taking those nominations, and if for some reason that individual is not able to make it to Tallahassee, oftentimes, if it permits with our schedules, and the type of event aligns up with the kind of work that we do, we'll travel, whether it's our CEO or I have presented the Champion of Service Award at volunteer recognitions and so on. So you can certainly ask us or email me about that option, and it really is so special for these volunteers. And regardless of your political affiliation, I think it is really exciting to be able to meet the key players in our executive branch and to have them thank you for the work that you've done serving Floridians as volunteers. So I hope you all will consider that and consider nominating an individual that you know who's worthwhile. All right, so I did want you to see who's represented today on the call. We've got quite a few different state agencies, and then we've got a number of different school boards and school districts here, a number of county health departments under the Department of Health. So you all span the gamut. Down at the bottom, Senior Corps, which is a federal program, but it's administered at the local level. So I believe we have someone from there. So thank you all so much, and you can kind of see the breadth of the folks that are here. So I will be giving some little points and ideas. They're not always going to apply exactly to the work that you may be doing, but I think it'll be clear enough for you to be able to kind of interpret what it looks like for you. And feel free, as I mentioned before, to ask as many questions as you'd like. Okay, so just quickly wanted to, pardon it, says DJJ in the middle there. But I just wanted to remind you all of where you are in terms of our branches of government. You're all under the executive branch. And it really is so powerful, the work that you all do. Well, almost all of your executive branch. I know Guardian ad litem is judicial. But thank you all so much. You all enforce and execute the rules of the legislature. And I know that that is a difficult thing, and that it becomes very complicated to try to do that, any sort of rules or regulations. And we have a large state.
The team can also help connect you to dental care, prenatal OB care, healthy.
There we go. Those are wonderful things, by the way. But you know, this work is not easy. Government gets flack for a lot of things, but people don't realize what goes into government functioning and all of the many, many ways that we live a civil, healthy, safe lifestyle because of government. So I just want you all to know how much I appreciate the work that you all do, and that you are all part of this big organizational chart here that helps to make our state run. All right, this is so key, and anytime I do trainings, I start with this. So if you're sick of hearing it, you can put your headphones on for about 3 minutes. But before planning anything about volunteer programming, and this is for those of you who are seasoned volunteer managers, this is for you too. You have to constantly go back to these things. Your vision, your mission, your values, your principles, these should permeate everything you do. It is so easy to go down a rabbit hole of the kind of volunteers that you need and when and where, and not step back and remember what you're doing it for and what the volunteers are doing it for. That bigger picture has got to be the foundation of the work that you do. So before the planning and the procedures and all of that, what's the vision of your organization? What is the mission? How is that operationalized? How are volunteers a part of that? And it's not making Florida better. That is way too general. And that's what all of you are doing in some way, but what are the specifics of your particular department? If you don't know the general mission statement of your department or your organization, I strongly suggest finding that out, what the vision is. If there are values or core principles, finding out what those are, really just kind of living and breathing that information. It's just really critical, and then it informs all the other work that you do, whether it's your paid work or for our purposes, the volunteer management that you establish and are part of. So I did want to go through a couple of mission statements that I found from some of your agencies or departments. So you'll see here, I think you can probably tell which organization this is, to increase public safety by reducing juvenile delinquency through effective prevention, intervention, and treatment services that strengthen families and turn around the lives of troubled youth, which is so powerful. And if you think about, you know, again, things like negative press or concerns or issues that people might have or perceive about the criminal justice system, this is a proactive, hopeful, and as well as specific mission statement. And that's the kind of information that should encapsulate any sort of volunteer programming for DJJ. And then you look, there's some guiding principles there, things like provide a safe and nurturing environment for our children, preserve and restore physical and mental health. These are great components, and everything ultimately, whether it's the finances of DJJ or it's, you know, any component of it, ultimately comes back to these principles and this mission. And so that's the kind of information that you want to look at and be familiar with for your organization. These are a few other ones. If you look, an agency that is accessible, and this was a vision component, an agency that is accessible and responsive to citizens, provides fair and efficient tax and child support administration, and achieves the highest levels of voluntary compliance. I think that was Department of Revenue. If you're on here, you can let me know. But these are all really clear. People spend a lot of time coming up with these mission statements and these principles for your organizations. And so spend that time looking at what that bigger picture is so that you can rattle this information off. If you're at a 2-year-old birthday party this Saturday and somebody asks you about what you do, and you say you work for the state, or you work for the county health department, or you work for the school district, can you throw out in just a couple of sentences the importance or the mission of what you do? This is, you know, you're always an ambassador and a representative, and you never know when you might hook somebody in terms of them really appreciating the work that you do and possibly having an interest in partnering with you in it. These were a few more. I know Sharon can't be on today. She last minute couldn't. She's with Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, but that's theirs, that second one, to manage fish and wildlife resources for their long-term well-being and the benefit of people, which is great. That one above, I believe, is the Department of Economic Opportunity. These are all really well-constructed, very powerful statements that you all have here. This is a couple of school districts, I think, kind of smushed together. This one has some of the principles. So, for example, extraordinary customer relations, being a school district with accountability, trust, providing a world-class education for all students. This is great, great language for you all to be using, whether it's in recruitment, in your policies and procedures and manuals, in terms of marketing and so on. Okay, so I do want to go briefly into the value of volunteerism. I would love to hear from you all. Why are volunteers valuable? You can either unmute or throw something out in the chat box. Excellent. So they help us fulfill our mission statement. They're an extra helping hand in schools. They offer great assistance with limited funding and staff. Volunteers really are the backbone of many nonprofits that we're part of as part of the state. They help save money. They help link gaps in servicing communities, and they're great resources. Perfect. You all could do my presentation for me. Thank you so very much. They really give because of the heart and not being paid. They help keep our schools safe. That's fantastic. Thank you all so much for those. So you all covered most of this, but I'm going to go through this with you. And you'll hear me say repeatedly the importance of language, and this is I can't understate this enough. If you think about the millions of dollars that organizations put into marketing, into communications, and into public relations, writing is really key. So the way that you frame opportunities, the way that you construct your policies and procedures, it is so important. If it's full of jargon and dense language, I'm not going to read it. You're not going to read it. It's going to collect dust, but we need all of that information. So how is it going to be palatable, digestible by a layperson? All of those things matter. So again, having that mission and vision statement, those principles is part of everything you do, weaving those into all of your materials and marketing, however that is most feasible. And then, the things that you all just listed, those are great sound bites in terms of why volunteers are great, and you want to use that kind of thing. Same thing with this language here. This is the kind of thing you can pull and use for a flyer or in an email. As you're working with different populations or trying to recruit different populations, what's going to be most appealing to them? It could be generationally certain components appeal in different ways. So, millennials, you'll see on the next page, the idea of encouraging them to bring new ideas and energy to your enterprise is a real hot button ideal draw for people who are millennials. Now, somebody who is maybe an older Gen Xer or a baby boomer, offering those volunteers would offer specialized skills, might be something that's appealing to them as they're probably in the zenith of their career or just sunsetting their career and do have a tremendous number of, have a breadth in terms of and depth of their skill sets and so on. So this is just some language that either you can use internally to define and to explain why volunteers are important, or potentially use externally as you are trying to share with people why you hope that they will partner with your organization in service. So we've got enhancing services by supplementing and broadening existing work, which somebody already commented on. Same thing, commenting on developing a group of strong supporters in your community, bringing community connections and personal networks to agencies and departments. That's a big one. Those specialized skills. Oftentimes, increasing diversity in a particular area. If you have a staff that's fairly homogenous in the county where you work, for example, let's say one of the health departments or school districts, and your client population is very different from the individuals who actually are employees. It may be that targeting those underserved populations or that particular demographic and helping to raise up ambassadors or representatives from your clientele who can then be influencers in whatever that subculture is the best way for you to recruit volunteers. So you increasing that diversity, providing opportunities, and opening doors for some of the populations that you already serve, and then those that you do not, that can happen through empowering volunteers from those particular diverse groups. All right, so as I mentioned before, a lot of younger folks, which I will be honest, I'm one of the younger folks. I am a mixed Gen X millennial kind of person. But the bringing new ideas and energy is really appealing to younger individuals, not just, okay, I'm going to do something that other people are telling me that I have to do, but that my ideas, my enthusiasm is going to be respected and invited. One of the great things about volunteers is they often give more time than they originally planned because they're genuinely interested. And they do contribute a tremendous amount of economic value, even if it's not necessarily in the form of financial donations. And most of you are familiar with the value of a volunteer annual hour. It's about $20-something right now for every hour that a volunteer serves. In 2014 in Florida, there were 3.15 million individuals who volunteered. There were 495.7 million hours of service. that occurred. And that's $11.4 billion of services contributed when it's calculated according to that hour. So we're talking about some significant resources when it comes to volunteers, which I know you all certainly already know. Does anybody have any questions right now? I do want to say before we go on how important it is to, when you are thinking about volunteers, to frame them very carefully. Angela, I'll get you that amount shortly of the volunteer dollar. It changed for this year, so I'll send that along to you guys in the email that I send you with all kinds of resources. I'm going to overwhelm you with articles and information that will be of help to you after the webinar. But 2 ways to frame volunteers, and I know you all don't probably, likely don't have this issue. But the first one is just that presumption that volunteers are free. The reality is, and think about yourself as a volunteer, your experiences as a volunteer, because that often helps to remind us of what that experience is like. If you invest minimally in terms of your effort in volunteers, because you think of them as free and critical and really helpful, but they're not employees, eventually that attitude is going to come across to them. And your needs and the volunteers' needs are not going to be met well. So this is critical to remember. These are people who are enlisted to serve. Don't use that word free with volunteers. Even if they joke about being free labor and so on, remind them constantly that they are making a choice to serve and make their communities better. Remind them of that mission or the things that they're doing so that are helpful. So don't use that word free. And they're not free for you if you're putting the right strategic time into growing those volunteers, managing them, recruiting them, retaining them, and so on. This costs money. Or time, rather, sometimes a little bit of money to really have the kinds of outcomes that you want in the first place. And then also just remembering the breadth of capability that volunteers have. So not just thinking about volunteers as someone to do data entry or somebody to do a service project or someone to answer phones, although all of those are very, very important. But just don't think of them, I like this term, as unthinking low-level robots available for any mindless task. And they're really, the reality is a lot of people still perceive volunteers that way. So remembering that they're human beings who bring all kinds of skills and energy and perspectives to your organization is really important. So we're going to take a step back now. And this is important to do whether you are starting a program or you have an existing program, okay? We went from mission and value and how important that is, and now we're going to evaluating need, capacity, and support. Oftentimes people get antsy to start with recruitment. And if you do not have a program that is robust, that is healthy, that has the capacity to deal with and manage the volunteers that you have, that's going to keep them busy with important work that connects back to your mission, what you're going to potentially do is leave a bad taste in the mouths of people who do come in to volunteer. We all know that people are way more likely to share negative experiences than they are positive experiences. And then that ends up being more work for you. You end up scrambling and you're not representing your organization well when that's the case. So it is so critical to start with evaluation and with preparing with the resources that you need to do this job well as a volunteer manager. And this is for the existing program. Some of you have some very well-oiled machines, and that is incredible, and I hope you are willing to share as we go along some of the things that you've been able to do ideas that you've had, ways that you've been able to recruit volunteers and so on. But every now and then it's also critical to step back if you are someone who has a great, well-established volunteer program. Sorry, there is somebody who is just writing. I don't know if you all can see this, but writing all kinds of things in our chat box, and it is, I think it's just some sort of spam or something. Anyway, thank you all for your patience and trying to dismiss him or her. Okay, we'll see what happens there. Anyway, yes, Antoinette, I am just going to ignore him. Okay, so here we go in terms of evaluation. And does that make sense to everybody why it's so critical to have that mission statement or that vision statement always in your head informing everything? Hopefully it does. Hi, Clifford, how are you? Okay, good. Libby says yes, that makes sense. Okay, so I hope that you all do step back and look at that, and then also looking at evaluating your capacity before launching forward. The most wonderful situation that also could be really difficult is you have this great program that you've thought about, and you need 15 volunteers and 45 people sign up. What are you going to do about that? You have a program and you need 45 people and 15 people show up. Do you have new ideas or backup ideas for the reality that you might have fewer people, or now their excitement has waned because there's nothing for them unless you reach a certain number of volunteers? This is the kind of thing that thinking about it ahead of time is so important. I was working with an organization the other day, and they were a little frustrated because they had plans and a couple of volunteers backed out last minute, so then they had the remaining volunteers just kind of sitting around, and then they eventually sent them home. And I said, have other projects ready. So you didn't get the 7 people you need, you only had 3. What else can those individuals do? Because that ultimately was a waste of their time, and there's plenty of work that needs to be done or that can be done at your organization. So just have a little list of ways in which volunteers can serve and assist, whether you have 2 of them or you have 15 of them. Okay, so here's the components of a need. A formal investigation of how volunteers can serve an agency and what types of volunteer skills are needed. Many of you already have position descriptions for volunteers. You already have your goals. Always reassessing them periodically is great. Get a fresh set of eyes on them. You know, it's a great idea if you've got fantastic other state partners, people that are outside of your department or division or outside of your agency. If you've got good nonprofit partners or even private sector partners, have them take a look at your volunteer manual. Have them take a look at a position description. And if they say, I don't understand this, you have way too many acronyms in there, I don't get this, this sounds like state government speak, then you've got a good perspective there. So every now and then, getting out of that tunnel vision, having somebody else have a look that's kind of outside of your realm can be really helpful in terms of examining what the need is and whether you're articulating clearly what your goals are and what those needs are. So how can volunteers move your agency toward its goals? You want to be as specific as possible about this. Again, it's not, well, volunteers can make help Florida grow economically as a state, very generally. But you want to look at, okay, through education, tabling, community events, volunteers can share our concerns about childhood obesity and through that, hopefully influence varying subcultures in our community to be more aware of, yada, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So get specific about what those goals are that you want volunteers to achieve. And one thing that's really big about this, and we'll talk about this in just a second, is note that we're looking at goals, not number of volunteers first. So with recruitment, part of that anxiety is getting enough volunteers, right? Well, before we even go to the number of volunteers, we need to know the goals that we want them to achieve. And that's going to inform the kind of volunteer we need, the demographic, what kind of skills, if any, they need to have, and so on. So look at those goals first. And a way to do that, and again, for you existing volunteer organizations, periodically do this. You know, every fiscal year, even more often than that, things are changing. There's reorganization in our agencies and organizations. People have left positions. Positions are being filled. Positions are being consolidated. There are absorptions of certain responsibilities that varying divisions have to deal with. So all those things are changing, so that means that your volunteer program may change as well. So keeping an eye on that is important. So tasks currently performed by staff, where assistance is needed, tasks not performed by staff, staff activities that might be performed by volunteers when staff is off duty. These are good questions. Now, has anybody had problems, you don't have to comment on this, has anybody had any issues with staff comfort with volunteers? Okay, well that's a good thing. If you think of anything, let me know, but I do want to show you this real quickly, okay? Because this does come up. Possible staff concerns about volunteers, okay? So don't let it blindside you. Sometimes this is a reality for people. If you have an individual who's just started in your office, they're super excited about the job that they have, again, brand new, and they come in and they see a very seasoned volunteer who's very comfortable with the staff, who knows what they're doing, who's always getting given extra responsibilities, loves the work they're doing, and so on. That could be something that is overwhelming for someone who is new. Or someone who is a seasoned employee, and there is a new volunteer who has new ideas, and staff members love those ideas, and so on. That could be overwhelming for that individual as well. So these are just some examples of staff concerns connected to volunteering, and then some ways to avoid the problem. So, for example, previous bad experience. So staff has had unfortunate experiences with volunteers, either the personalities clashed or the volunteer flaked out or didn't follow through on what they were supposed to, or so on. So this says steps to take to avoid the problem. Show job description format and ask for staff help in writing others. Okay, so this is getting input and buy-in from other staff members when you do that. Reassure that particular staff member about careful selection, training, supervision, and the right to reassign or terminate volunteers if necessary. So they're involved, and then there's also some power there. There's some authority there. Okay, I'm really struggling with this particular volunteer for this reason. Well, volunteer is not invincible. You know, if necessary, then disciplinary actions or termination may need to ensue. Identifying other benefits to that individual or offering to provide them support as needed. So I like this this chart, and I'll give you all the resources for it, but I think it's important to consider that there are times when staff can be overwhelmed or concerned about the input or the activities of volunteers. Okay, so this especially is for my fantastic seasoned volunteer program managers who are on the call, and also for those of you who are interested as you are looking up best practices in volunteer management, trying to pull all this together. This says often volunteer positions are created by staff requesting volunteers to do certain activities they themselves cannot do. Nothing wrong with that. That is fantastic. That's a large component, is enhancing and expanding those services within your organization. So volunteer roles initially meet an identified need and then continue year after year, and we fill the vacancies left by departing volunteers with new ones, okay? That's not necessarily an issue, but if you recall what I was just saying before, our organizations are living organisms, that they are constantly changing, and we have to be careful that our volunteer programs match those changes and haven't fallen behind in terms of what really might be most beneficial for our organization. Before we know it, the range of volunteer assignments is stale and lacks vision, and the volunteer department only has time to focus on filling existing slots rather than on developing new, outside-the-book types of positions. Does this register or resonate with anybody? Just that kind of rat race of trying to fill existing volunteer positions, not having the opportunity to think about new possible positions, new ideas about how volunteers can serve. Okay. Well, in terms of outside the book. Well, outside the book and outside of the box. Okay, let's see. Would be interested in ideas, key volunteers. Great, Libby. So there are so many neat ideas out there, and it is sometimes hard to kind of get the creative juices flowing. You all are maxed out. I know you're all working extremely hard in your positions. So if your position isn't solely dedicated to volunteer work or only partially is, then I know that there are other components of your job that creep in on that, and so you're trying to maximize what small amount of time you do have to make these volunteer programs great, or to establish a really solid foundation for a volunteer program. But it is so valuable to step away every now and then, look back at those mission statements and values, to think about the work that your particular division is executing, and think of those new ways to involve volunteers. And there's lots of really great ideas online and so on, and again, I will provide you all with lots of resources after this. But this is one I thought was really creative. And this is from several years ago, but this was this is Oakland County government in California. So if you look at this, it says their new volunteer program, Net Volunteers, harnesses the power of social networking to connect government and networking to connect government and the people it serves. I mean, that very generally, I think, would apply to every single one of you who's on this call. And I'm not saying that you have need for it necessarily, or the resources for it, but generally speaking, it, on its surface, seems like something we could all use. So this is through popular sites like Facebook and Twitter and various blogs and other web-based community forums. Net Volunteers participants share the latest information about Oakland County government with the public. The Net Volunteers project is a new way of thinking about civic engagement. Transparency is such a buzzword in government these days, but the Net Volunteers project really aims to deliver on that by directly involving citizens in the process of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I'll give you all the website that provides more information, and I'm not sure if they're doing this anymore. I didn't see more recent information about it, but what a cool idea. People can do this remotely. You can teleconference with people to discuss information. These are people who can monitor other county sites or whatever your partner sites are. So if you are the Department of Health or your school board, and there are associations connected to the work that you do, nonprofits, business sector, you can have people who are monitoring that social media landscape, who are retweeting interesting articles for you all, so that your Facebook page is not solely, for example, if you have a Facebook page, isn't solely about volunteer opportunities, where you're sharing timely, newsworthy, interesting information. Those individuals can tag people in posts for your site. They can comment on other people's sites, share about volunteer opportunities, and so on. So I love this idea and think it could be probably helpful for a number of you all, should this be something that you are interested in, because we know how critical social media is these days, especially if you want to connect with younger Gen Xers and millennials. Okay, so what you want to think of, this is a good way to frame it, is how does volunteer assistance complement the work of paid staff? Okay, so we want to remember the the value of volunteerism. It complements that work by increasing diversity, by enhancing existing services, creating new services. It helps, it complements by providing community connections and so on. So you can look at those value of those points from the value of volunteerism slide. You can also think about your mission and how volunteer work complements the work of paid staff in light of your mission. And then you really can brainstorm roles. So I'm just going to read through some of these. Most of them, in some way, you all probably are using volunteers for or would like to. So there's clerical work. I know that some of you may not believe me, but some of you also may be these people. There are people who love data entry. I know you're probably laughing on mute. If you're one of those people, I want to hear from you in the chat box. My husband is getting his CPA. He got his bachelor's and master's degrees in tax accounting, and I just cannot even comprehend that. I flip through his textbooks every now and then, and it's just Greek to me. But he's interested. He can drill down and focus on that. I am the one chasing the butterflies and love to make connections with our friends and be social and all that. We all have our different abilities and strengths and gifts, so just because there's something that your organization needs and you're not necessarily excited about it doesn't mean you won't have volunteers who are excited about it. And a lot of that has to do with your targeted marketing and how you frame things. So that's clerical work. You can have people who are tabling for events, who, as I mentioned before, are representatives or some sort of ambassador for your organization. Use volunteers to lead volunteers. So your volunteer can be the one that does the training or the orientation for your new volunteers. They can do check-in or registration at events. They can do intake for your organization. They can man help lines or resource lines if you need them to. Tech is such a big component of this. If you get one of these students from an undergrad or a tech college to do one project for you, because remember, volunteering isn't just this recurring, we want this person forever, but it can be a time-delimited project. So let's say you have somebody who is in a graphics design class and you need some help designing a brochure or flyer. That's a few weeks maybe of time. If you're suspect of college students flaking out, that's just a little bit of time, and you may get some great content from them as a result. You could have somebody who helps teach your staff members about the newest Windows operating system or varying Microsoft Excel hacks, how to be more productive in Microsoft Excel, how to be more productive in Microsoft Word. Productivity classes for your employees or for your clients. I've been really interested a lot in time management recently and how best to organize to-do lists and priorities. You could get somebody in to help you all with that, volunteer to share that information, to provide continuing education or professional education for your staff, or any other types of classes that you might want for your clients or consumers. These individuals can do that. You could bring somebody in to help with how best to create a good PowerPoint presentation or a Prezi or something like that. Stress management, all kinds of ways that you can bring people in to help educate your existing volunteers or your staff or to facilitate their growth or to help manage the volunteers that you already have. Interpretation skills is huge. Somebody who can read Braille, somebody who speaks Spanish, somebody who speaks Creole, who can come in and do translation for you in a variety of ways. You know, I read about something online the other day that was really interesting. It was actually a health department. They were having a hard time getting certain subpopulations to the actual health department. Well, they hired, they enlisted some volunteers to map the bus routes. So how long would it take somebody who lives about 2 miles away to get to the health department? Well, it's a straight shot to the health department in a car, but by bus it was taking people 45 minutes to get there. And so that was some really interesting information that happened because some volunteers were doing some research assistance. So if you think to yourself, okay, this is a really great project, but I just don't have the time to get the facts or the statistics together or the qualitative information together to bring it to fruition, that can be a volunteer opportunity for someone. Orientation packet, helping you to simplify systems and processes. All of those are things that volunteers can do. So hopefully that kind of gets your creative juices flowing a little bit. If you have any ideas or volunteers are serving your organization, I'd love to hear from you as well. If there are things that are in addition to that. We know that we have tons of volunteers in our parks system and that work with Florida Fish and Wildlife. So we know that plenty of individuals love to work in the outdoors and in terms of natural resources preservation. What else are volunteers doing in your organization? Okay, didn't catch anything. Is anybody there? You guys are doing okay? Okay. Yeah, Melissa just said somebody who's artistic huge. We're going to talk about websites in a second. If you can get somebody who's good to help you with a website or with Facebook and framing and marketing, oh man, you got to snap that person up because that's where we're headed and where we already are. You've got to be, your web presence has to be updated and it has to be just a quality space for people to go to. So here are a couple of things that you want to think about. You know, we're still under evaluating and kind of establishing the capacity and support that you need. Who are your stakeholders? Who has to improve the implementation of the program or approve changes? Who's going to manage your volunteers? So if you are desperate for more volunteers and you're not doing a great job of staying connected to the ones you already have, it's really important to consider whether or not you do have the capacity to work with more volunteers. This is so important. It's like that classroom of 40 kindergartners versus a classroom of 25 kindergartners. Not that volunteers are kindergartners, but they have to be, if you're able to focus and respect them and to connect to them, that's going to be a huge boon for you when it comes to retention. And again, whatever they see and whatever they experience, they're sharing with the people around them. Antoinette said, I believe that volunteers need to be cared for as we do employees. Volunteers want to feel passion for their cause, recognition for their deeds, use for their capabilities, and thanks for their assistance. Volunteers managing small volunteer work groups, great idea. Thank you so much for that, Antoinette. And it is so true. A lot of times if you're reading information about employees and things like that, just substitute the word volunteer in there. It helps to remind you that Okay, these are individuals, human beings, who are providing us with a service. And no, they are not employees, but yes, they must be valued and respected. So you want to think about that. Buy-in from your staff members. You know, if you're out sick one day and a volunteer comes in to do work, does everybody look at that volunteer kind of like they're an alien and have to shuffle around for work for them to do? Okay. Your staff members in that particular office should have a good working idea or knowledge of what volunteers even do. Okay, those are also people who can be spreading the word about volunteer programming. You know, there are individuals who work alongside or kind of near volunteers that don't really understand what the volunteer, you know, and that is a concern. You want to have staff members who are in the vicinity of volunteers, especially on a regular basis, have a really good understanding of the work they're doing. They can encourage that volunteer, they can answer questions for that volunteer, and so on. You know, what resources do you need to do this well? I usually have this picture of this broken chair that my boss used to sit in that I inherited, not here in Volunteer, Florida. But are you putting that volunteer in the former broom closet that still smells like bleach? You know, is the person's computer running, you know, Microsoft 2000 on it? Have you given the person an email address if part of their job is to reach out to other organizations and individuals via email? Have you given them the office supplies that they need? Do they have the history and the context of the organization necessary to be a good ambassador for your organization? Those kinds of things are extremely important to think about. You need that office space. Does your staff have the capacity or the awareness, let's say, if you have to deal with cultural sensitivities, if you have to deal with persons experiencing or who have disabilities, language barriers, you know, all of those types of things you want to be thinking of when it comes to your resources. Can you connect to all different types of volunteers? Are you prepared to do that? If people who maybe aren't originally in your head as the types of folks who want to volunteer do have an interest, can you serve them and help them to serve you well? And then again with the goals, and I want to share a little story with you. Okay. So consider for a moment an organization that exists to plant trees. In year one, it has 100 volunteers and plants 1,000 trees. So 100 volunteers, 1,000 trees. In year two, it retains 50 volunteers and again plants 1,000 trees. So now we've got 50 volunteers and 1,000 trees. By the measure of head count only, year two would raise all sorts of red flags since they've seen 50 people not return. Yet the facts point to year two as a great success because fewer resources have been used to achieve the same impact. The return on investment is much higher. Okay, so what is needed is the number of appropriate and dependable volunteers that an organization can adequately support to do the work well. As soon as the number of volunteers exceeds an organization's capacity to deploy them successfully, the law of diminishing returns takes over. Does that register with anybody? I hope so. We have to be careful, and I had this on this other slide, of not just looking at goals for volunteers in terms of number of hours and number of volunteers. Okay, you can look at it through the outcomes in children in terms of their reading level or their math level. We can look at it in terms of the number of plants planted or the number of invasive species cleared from a park, or we can look at it based on the number of opportunities to speak at schools about some sort of health benefit or health precaution. You know, there's so many ways to look at the efficiency and effectiveness of volunteers beyond just the number of volunteers you have. And this is just very important to remember and to consider. So I do want to stop here for those of you who are in education, just briefly. We have a really exciting opportunity. This is our second year administering it. It's called the Rural Community Assets Fund. And this fund is $100,000. And each grantee will get between $5,000 and $10,000. They can request a minimum of 5, a maximum of 10. And this is for organizations, state, county, local governments, nonprofits, and so on, who are involved in educational programming in certain rural areas. So it's most of our smaller counties in terms of population, but the funding specifically is for recruitment, management, and retention of volunteers for educational programming. So I just want to encourage you all, those of you who are with some of our school boards and school districts, it's called the Rural Community Assets Fund, and I will send you all a link to it. But it's on the Volunteer Florida website, which is volunteerflorida.org, under grants. It's the very first one. We just announced it yesterday. But this is a great opportunity. It's only a 25% match. And I am the grants manager and contract administrator. So once you read through that information, I'm the person for you to connect with. And the reason I bring that up now is we have several different performance measures, one of which is that you increase the types of services provided to students. So maybe you don't have the you don't have an increase in the number of volunteers, but now you're able to offer multiple types of services to the same students. Or maybe you have more students that are served because your volunteers are better equipped to serve them, things like that. So again, with this slide and with that story, there are multiple ways to measure volunteer impact, and you want to tell that story. It's a great recruitment option and opportunity is to be telling the story not just of the number of hours or the number of people, but of that actual very specific impact that those volunteers have had. Yes, Tammy, it can be in kind or cash. Okay, I am not going to spend time on this unless any of you have any specific questions. But you've got to look at all of these things before and during and periodically recruitment or anything connected to your program, okay? Just let you scan through those real quickly. You know, these days, very, very important to consider bullying, harassment, discrimination, making sure you have that grievance process, and so on. So just a look at all the kinds of information that would be worth looking at. Let me tell you one of the best things about volunteer management, cut and paste, okay? You have a great, if you see a great volunteer manual, you see ideas for recruitment from other people, you know, unless that's copyrighted, and or if you want to just shoot an email and say, I'd love to use this, forms and ways of phrasing things and all of that, so much is already out there that you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to customize the wheel for your specific purposes. So just keep that in mind if this list seems a little bit overwhelming to you. Okay, so this component can just be a general framework for you of the kind of the type of information beyond kind of the legalese details that you should have some sort of policies or procedures about. This is all internal, but knowing how you're going to screen volunteers, it's okay not to accept a particular volunteer or to have a preference for them to be in a different position. If they are not cut out for the type of work that you are asking them to do. My husband, for example, is an extreme introvert. When he's around people that he knows and is familiar with, he's really comfortable and relaxed. But I'm not going to put him in the middle of a community outreach event. It's just not going to go well for anyone, really. So that's not necessarily an area of strength for him. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there are particular positions he might not be well suited for. So that screening process and that interviewing process is important to that. And I just put that recruiting volunteers, I folded that because if you're talking about planning, again, all the things I've mentioned come first. You need to know how you're going to interview and screen, orient, and train your volunteers. You need to know how that's going to all work before you actually recruit them. Okay, these are the elements of a really great position description. As I mentioned before, step outside of your agency, step outside of your program. If you are steeped in, I know Chris is on here. If you're just steeped in Department of Business and Professional Regulation information and you really want people to be involved and connected to your organization, ask your friends, ask your family members to look at a position description and tell you what they think of it. Make sure that you're getting that input. It's so easy to get in that tunnel vision when we have been a part of an organization for a while and not realize that something just doesn't sound appealing to anybody else. So get outside of your own heads and your own, office spaces and ask about some of these marketing materials, about your position descriptions and so on. Okay, you want to connect that purpose to your mission, to the impact, to outcomes, to your principles. Make sure you put on there your required or desired qualifications. With the commitment, is it something that is flexible? Is it hands down, we need you 5 hours a week? Give people as many options as possible to complete the job. Work location, more and more people are having the opportunity to work virtually. Be careful of state lingo and what language would appeal most to your audience. If you're putting something up in a university, it's probably going to be a little bit different from if you're putting that same flyer up at a senior living facility. If it's not, that's okay, but okay. So based on everything we've done so far, here's an example of a description. And I want you to tell me what's good about it and what needs to change about it. You can either unmute and share or write something in the chat box about it. Okay, I got a few. What else? Okay, so I have two actually. I don't like that it said while not working. Okay, I completely agree, Natasha, on that. And then important to include need volunteer for up to 10 hours a week. Perfect. So Allison, there's no detail about how often or what the time commitment is. It's not very eye-catching. It's missing days and hours. Good. Okay. So here's another one. The underlined are the portions that have been added, along with the photo. So this one is more inviting. It is too many, it might be too many words, Tammy mentioned, that's good. And it still doesn't have the days and hours, doesn't explain how this helps the organization, good. Perfect, okay. So there are strengths and weaknesses of both. This one, if you notice the age-ish of the girl, first of all, that we even have a photo, that I think shapes your attitude about clerical duties. In your head, you may have had maybe an older individual at a computer or something like that. But this immediately takes people out of whatever their presumption is about clerical work and kind of reframes how they see it, because there's this young person smiling, looks like she's having a good time doing this, and she is doing, this is actually a volunteer that we do a lot of filing and database work for the organization. So that first part, no experience necessary, we will train you so people don't have to worry about whether or not they're capable of doing the work. It is very big. Clerical can be done by men too. This is really important. And I think a lot of times when people keep their office skills while not working, they're thinking about moms who have taken time off to raise children. So be thinking about that, opening up your perspective when it comes to populations that you're thinking about sharing with. So it is pretty long. And there's ways potentially to break it up in a position description. But those are just a few things that could be done to enliven the description just a little bit. You know, other things you want to think about, if it's an evening or any type of long event, are you going to provide childcare for the person? Is the place accessible for somebody who doesn't have a car? You know, just those little nuances can really help to inform you on what types of details you want to share with people who may be interested in volunteering. All right, so let's look at this now. Recruiting volunteers, actually recruiting after you've done all of that planning. And again, I know many of you are thinking, I've done the planning. Go back through, try to look with fresh eyes, ask other people what their thoughts are, because you may get a refresher, a little revival in terms of your program. You may think of new ways to tweak your marketing, your recruitment, some of your policies and procedures so that they have a better language to them that is more appealing and more comfortable for people, all of that. So there's always, if you have time, it is so helpful to just do this periodic reassessment or to prepare all these things if you're starting a program. Okay, so I know I say this a lot, but I cannot emphasize this enough. I went to a page today, this morning, and this is what I got, okay? I know that state websites, you know, even at the local, whether it's the county department, so on, sometimes there aren't a ton of resources to make those websites incredibly dynamic, and that's okay. But if people are going to get volunteer information from your site, it has to be live. Okay, if there's information on there from June 2016, I'm not going to read it. I am not going to look for an email address or a phone number to try to find out what new opportunities exist. If you Google the name of your organization and the word volunteer, a couple different, you know, Google searches like that and see what pops up, and if anything is just out of date on a random site, you know, a volunteer opportunity site from your city or something like that, get that stuff down. Because what it is indicating to people a lack of professionalism. So do not have the 404 error monster eating your resources. I just really thought this was pretty ridiculous and funny. But I was actually looking at, I think this was Washington State Department of Corrections, I think, because I was trying to find something on their site, and I clicked on something about volunteering, and this is what I got. No, 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 no. So please think about something. about that. If you are on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, be committed to being on that medium. You should be posting, if you have Facebook, at least once a week. You know, if you are one of the county health departments, or you are, you know, you're representing whatever the different state agency, Facebook is not for every few weeks you throw something out there. The way the algorithms work in these, for these social media avenues, you have to post regularly if you want to be on people's newsfeed. And it cannot just be volunteer opportunities. Interesting articles, links to your partners, fun stories, news about your agency, current events that have something to do with your organization or your mission. Keep it busy. And always have the right information. The phone number needs to be correct. The email address needs to be correct. You know, most people, the first thing they do is they go to your website. If you can't keep your website updated, then you have a button that says go to our Facebook page. Don't even bother putting anything on that page that might be incorrect, you know, with that copyright at the bottom 2013 on it. This, especially for millennials and young Gen Xers, is huge. So whatever you can do to make sure that your digital footprint is timely, is up to date. It can be simple. So we're not saying flash media and all these fancy things, but clear language that is up to date with clear contact information. I am not going to click through 2, 3, 4, 5 times to figure out all of the details about where I can volunteer. The other thing is, if you have a page and it says, we love volunteers, email me here if you have an interest, I want to know ahead of time what those volunteer opportunities might be. I should be able to scan the page, see clerical work, data entry, tabling for events in the community, et cetera, and just have an idea that I'd be interested in at all. Not a lot of folks are doing that level of investigation to find a volunteer opportunity. You need to get them quickly in on the information that you want to have to provide them. Okay, those darn millennials. What are some of the presumptions or assumptions people have about millennials? They're the bomb, says the millennial. Perfect. They're lazy, entitled, have a short attention span, is one stereotype. Anything else? Okay. Here are a few other things. They're broke, lazy, entitled. They don't like to join things. They're not really interested in having kids. They don't really have jobs. They live with their parents. They just haven't grown into being adults. Some of them are getting married. Some of them don't care. So every single generation, the older individuals complain about the younger individuals, right? And so we're seeing that. The reality is our largest generation is millennials. And these individuals are enterprising, they're digital native, they're familiar with the recession. They got a lot of college debt and credit card debt, a lot of them do. These are just kind of facts. They're part of the sharing economy, so they've grown up with Redbox, Dropbox, you know, Airbnb, you know, all of these different ways of sharing goods and materials. It's been hard for them to find jobs, and volunteering is a pathway to employment. And I'll send you all some articles on that, but that is a great way to draw in students, and it's to remind them that kind of exposure is critical. Yes, they are digital natives, so they are not challenged with technology. They are always up on the latest thing. This is absolutely true. Edith, thank you for mentioning that. They care about authenticity and transparency. You know, these kids have grown up, for the most part, you know, a big chunk of their lives they had, you know, an African-American president. Their, you know, marriage equality has been a reality for them. They're very socially conscious in a number of ways, and that's what they're familiar with. They are suspect of authority oftentimes, but who isn't when they're in their 20s? They really do want to feel like they are committed to a cause that's bigger than themselves, but they also really need that individual acknowledgement and affirmation about the work that they're doing. That is a really, really critical thing for them. So just keep that in mind as you are working with this group. Oftentimes, millennials do feel less valued and less connected, in part because of some of the presumptions about them and their generation, but they're significantly more likely to be engaged compared to older non-millennials. Okay, they have a balance, as I was saying before, between individualism and loyalty. So you want to keep that in mind. The text that I used here, that's Comic Sans, and a lot of you use Comic Sans or Times New Roman or Arial for your flyers. Stop doing it. It's dated, and young people do not care for it. Avoid clip art. There are a lot of easy templates out there for posters that bring you into the 2010s. Okay, and you can even get volunteers to help you with that. That's important. This was an interesting article. If you notice that on the trophy, the kid is missing the ball, the soccer ball, and it says "good try," which is just that idea that a lot of millennials have been coddled and feel entitled and so on. It was a really interesting article. But they want jobs where they can have an impact. They want personal fulfillment. They want to bring that new energy and those new ideas to the workplace and to volunteer opportunities. So keep that in mind with them. And our baby boomers, they tend to have much more of a sense of loyalty. Now, incidentally, when they were a little younger than my age, they were hippie flower children who were going to ruin the democracy, ruin our country. So oftentimes they're going to do this kind of work out of a sense of duty, civic duty, and so on. But we have a variety of different age groups that we're working with, and it is important to meet them where they are and find out what some of their motivations are, and I'm going to send you all some information about that too. All right, so going after them, you want to get your team together first and know your staff strengths, okay? You want to ask other agency employees to spread the word about the work that you're doing. Because are they doing that? Sometimes they're not. They see that as your responsibility, but not necessarily theirs. Can you take 10 minutes at your next staff meeting and give them specific details, not just we need volunteers, but we need individuals who are willing to do this, 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 or this. You do want to know about how many you hope to recruit. Ask, ask, ask. Not just if you see there your spheres of influence. You know, we do our Hail Marys on Facebook, and that's important. But, you know, this is just your immediate set of friends and family. Have you ever actually asked them, or do you skip over them immediately to Facebook? You know, your churches, if they have a list or personal ask. People volunteer because someone asked them to volunteer directly. So all the marketing is really great, but then somebody saying, listen, you know, Johnny is in my 4th grade class. We would love to have you come read to the kids, as well as blah, blah, blah. It's a great chance for you to connect with him and with the other students. We would love to have you, even if it's just for the first 9 weeks of the spring semester, something like that, that direct ask. And just because someone says no does not mean never. And we're all like that too, where there are times when something is just not right, but it doesn't mean that in the future it won't be. So even if they say no, know that that's never to be scratched from your list. You have got to start with your existing volunteers, your existing students, your existing clients. Start there in terms of your asks about who else could volunteer. Those people can be those representatives for you. If you're tabling for an education event, those of you who are with school boards, if you have students there as well as the parents, as well as teachers, and have those students say, hey, we would love for you to volunteer. Here's why it's been so helpful for me to have so-and-so as a mentor, or I had so much fun at field day, and I know that it's because such and such parents were able to put it all together, and I just had such a great time with my friends. Get those students into the mix to help you share that information. Get families into the mix. You can post through service learning centers. How many of you all are familiar with this or have done this? If you have a university or a college in your town, how many of you all have connected to their service learning center? Okay, so no service learning. I'm going to try to get this up on the screen because I think it'll be helpful for everyone. Okay, so if you have a look here, this is service learning and civic engagement at Florida Gulf Coast University. Okay, so this is what is service learning. Educational experience designed to meet mutually identified community and university needs. Okay, so this is formalized. Students can't just flake out on this. This is an extremely important opportunity for them that they either get credit for or that is a huge resume builder for them. But this is really exciting. Most public universities in Florida, if not all, have service learning opportunities, and you can contact the Service Learning Center at that university about being a partner with them. So service learning is a reflective activity that contributes to personal and career growth. It encourages civic engagement and responsibility. And you never know, that could lead, again, to employment for some of those students because volunteer is that pathway. So just be thinking about ways in which to connect to these environments with your universities. And just be careful. I know it is hard sometimes to trust these millennials or to trust that you're going to get that consistent assistance that you need. But it is not always the case that these are individuals who can't be relied upon. If anything, some of them can just really help you powerfully to achieve the work that you have an interest in achieving through volunteers. Okay, has anybody connected to a local business, either for pro bono or to promote opportunities? Does anybody have partnerships with private sector businesses? Okay. Well, that is a really great idea if it's not something that you have been a part of, is to talk to local businesses about partnering with you. If they don't have an employee volunteer program, ask them if they're willing to do that. Okay, yeah, so schools have business partnerships. We have some partnerships with schools and nonprofits, but not businesses. Yeah, and I know that schools definitely tend to have those business partnerships, which is great. And you can start with just asking them to start to build an employee service opportunity. So, you know, we really need this assistance. We would love to have 5 of your employees once a week come out and help work with our kids. It'll be great publicity for your organization, and we really need more mentors for our at-risk 4th grade students, or whatever the thing is, or in, you know, whatever your state agency is, whatever kind of support it is that you need, whatever type of work it is that your particular division is doing. You can partner with other nonprofits, with businesses, other entities for something that's mutually beneficial for your organization. You want to think about that. Okay, so this again is a little bit for the teachers, but it can be for anybody, the health departments, everyone. So what you see here, that Rural Community Assets Fund that I shared with you, one of our grantees is the Boys and Girls Club in Perry, Florida. And the older students, it's hard to tell which ones are older or not, but the older students read to the younger students. And that's a requirement of being part of the Boys and Girls Club, is that if you're a teenager, you go and you spend time working with the little ones. And so this type of mentorship or connection, and you can do this with volunteers and other volunteers with your clients, but where there's some sort of either mentorship or helping people to feel that ownership of whatever the work is that they do. And, you know, if you're doing this in education, then those students are even more invested in education, because it's not just their own education that they begin to care about. It's the education of their little brothers and sisters and cousins and their friends' little sisters and brothers and so on. And they end up being some great spokespersons for you. Students can be just fantastic in connecting their families to the work of the school. And I had so much fun with them. That was a few weeks ago. The other thing is kids like to tell other kids what to do, or at least that's been my experience. It's something that I did with my brother. But so this component also helps with that in terms of students becoming ego invested in this and then dragging their parents in to participate with them in student activities and school activities because they are excited about that work. Same thing, any of your organizations that do work with kids, whether it's prevention or intervention work, PJJ, health departments, and so on, getting other individuals who are in the same peer group involved to be influencers and to encourage people to volunteer is very important and can be really helpful. So develop those relationships, that groundwork, whether it's with businesses, other nonprofits, those colleges, and so on. Find those places that you can have people serve. Young professionals group, Chamber of Commerce, there's all kinds of professional and social organizations that you may end up having a great fit with. And it might take a little groundwork, but it could really be worth it. There's some other components. Contact existing service and professional organizations, as I mentioned. You can use the term adopting, adopt our division and its needs for mentors or clerical work or people to do outreach events and so on, partnering with local businesses, make sure all your information is on these various national sites, just so that if somebody defaults to those, you do at least have your information on Volunteer Match, LinkedIn, All for Good, and so on, and then social media. You do want to make sure that you're matching individuals. I'll let you kind of read through those on your own, but you want to think about these things. Placement is a really important component, and as I said before, it's okay to acknowledge if it's not a good fit. So kind of my last component of this is pay attention to the little things. Remind volunteers about the impact that they're making. Ask them whether their role that originally was assigned to them actually met their expectations. It could be that their expectations were incorrect, so that part is fine, but it could also be that there was a misinterpretation in terms of how you shared it. So, be thinking about getting that kind of feedback from them, and keep records of your volunteers, if there are incidences, grievances, and keep track of those positive things that people say. Those quotes are perfect for your policy and procedure manual. They're perfect for Facebook, great stories that you can share with people, and so on. So does anybody have any questions about this or any other components of volunteer management for those of you who are still on the call? Okay, yes, so you will get a copy of the PowerPoint, and you're also going to get a whole set of resources from me, and then just some contact information. You're all going to be added to our General Volunteer Florida mailing list, which of course you can unsubscribe from, but that is going to provide you all the funding information as we release varying requests for proposals. That'll be really important. And I'm also going to send you a survey. I really want to know whether this was beneficial or not. If it wasn't, be honest with me, that's great. And if it was fantastic, I want to hear more about what your needs are. We will definitely be doing another state agency webinar in October or November. And then hopefully in between there, we're going to do some sort of convening for you all, either here in Tallahassee or possibly in Orlando, to make it more equidistant for other state agency employees. But thank you all so much, especially those of you who added in on chat. I really appreciate you making it interactive, and you will all get lots of resources in the next probably 48 hours or so. I'll be able to send that to you all. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you guys so much. I appreciate the encouragement in the chat box, and we will be in touch. Thank you for your time.